Welcome to Sumantra Codes, where we learn Python programming in a fun and easy way. This is episode 5 of our series, and today we are going to learn about tuples, how to create and use them, and what are the differences and similarities between tuples and lists. So what are tuples? Tuples are one of the built-in data types in Python that are used to store multiple items in a single variable. Tuples are similar to lists, but they have one major difference. Tuples are immutable, which means that once they are created, they cannot be changed, modified, or deleted. So why do we need tuples? Tuples are useful when you want to store a collection of data that is fixed and does not need to be changed throughout the program. For example, you can use tuples to store the names of the days of the week, the coordinates of a location, the dimension of a shape, or any other data that is constant and ordered. So how do we create tuples? There are several ways to create tuples in Python. The simplest way is to use parentheses and separate the items with commas. For example, let's assign the variable fruits, apple, banana, and cherry inside the parenthesis. Now if we print fruits and run the program, it will print the tuple apple, banana, and cherry. So the above line create a tuple named fruit that contains 3 strings, apple, banana, and cherry. And we have printed the content of the tuple on the console. Another way to create a tuple is to use tuple constructor function. This function takes an iterable objects such as list, a set, or a string and convert it into tuple. For example, let's create a tuple from a list. The variable number is assigned to a list containing 1, 2, 3, and then we can create a number tuple by calling the tuple constructor function on numbers. Let's print the number tuple also, and now we run it. So this will create number tuple which contain the same elements as the list number. Let's create a tuple from a string. So I have a name string with my name. Then I'm creating a name tuple variable which will be a tuple and which will be created by calling tuple constructor on name variable. Now let's print name tuple and run it. So you can see that name tuple contains each character of the string name as an element. SUMANTRA. Note that if you want to create a tuple with only one element, you need to add comma after the element. Otherwise, Python will not recognize it as a tuple. Let's see an example. Let's create a tuple with one element. To create a tuple with one element, we need to add a comma after the element. Otherwise, it will not be created as a tuple type. Type of single. So what happens if we do not add a comma after the element? Not a tuple variable, hello, and then we'll print the type of not a tuple variable. So intuitively, if you remember, this looks like a string type. So let's run and confirm it. So if you see the output, the first line, which is creating a single tuple, will create a variable named single that is a tuple with one element, hello. However, if you omit the comma, Python will treat it as a string and not as tuple. Tuples are ordered collections, which means that each element has a specific position or index. You can use the square brackets and the index number to access any element in a tuple. The index starts from 0 for the first element and goes up by 1 for each subsequent element. For example, Let's create a tuple with 3 elements, namely apple, banana, and cherry. So if I want to access the first element of the tuple, which is apple, then we'll use the index 0, which will fetch the apple. Similarly, second element will be fetched by index 1, which is banana. Let's print it. Print this one also. And finally, the last element, cherry, which will be accessed by index 2. If we run it, we'll get the desired output as apple, banana, and cherry. You can also use negative indexes to access elements from the end of the tuple. The last element has an index of -1. The second last element has an index of -2, and so on. For example, -1 will output the cherry, -2 will output the banana, and similarly, -3 will output apple at the console using print statement. So you can see fruit -1 output cherry, fruits -2 output banana, and fruits -3 output apple. You can also use slicing to access a range of elements in a tuple. Slicing is done by specifying the start index and the end index separated by colon. The start index is inclusive, which means that it is included in the slice. But the end index is exclusive, which means that it is not included in the slice. For example, let's add few more elements in our tuple. Let's slice fruits with starting with 1, which is the index 1 inclusive, and 4, which is the index 4 exclusive. So if I print it, so you can see this slice will return a new tuple that contains the elements from index 1 to 3, not 4. So we have a new tuple with banana, cherry, and orange in it. Next, let's see slicing fruits from start to third element exclusive. So the second slice, fruit square bracket colon 3, will return a new tuple that contains the elements from the beginning to index 2, not 3. Let's see one more example. Print fruits. Now we'll slice the tuple from 2 inclusive till end. So now if we run, so the third slice, fruit square bracket 2 colon, will return a new tuple that contains the elements from index 2 to the end, and the elements are cherry, orange, and grape. So how do we change or modify elements in tuples? As we mentioned before, tuples are immutable, which means that we cannot change or modify elements in a tuple once it is created. If we try to do so, Python will raise an error. For example, if we try to assign first element of tuple to peer and we run, this will raise a type error. Tuple object does not support item assignments. This means that tuple does not have methods like append, remove, or pop that can modify the elements. However, there is a workaround to change or modify elements in a tuple. You can convert the tuple into a list, make the changes to the list, and then convert the list back into tuple. So let's work on it. I'll create a fruit list from tuple using list constructor. Then I'll modify the first element of fruit list to peer. Then again, I'll assign fruits variable a new tuple from fruit list. And then let's print fruits again. And if we run it, so we can see the apple has been replaced by peer. So basically this will create a new tuple that contains the modified element, and note that this is not the same as changing the original tuple, but it is creating a new tuple. Similarly, we cannot add or remove elements in a tuple directly because tuples are immutable. If we try to do so, Python will raise an error. For example, if we try to add or append a new element in the tuple and run it, this will also give an error. So this will raise an attribute error. Tuple object has no attribute append. This means that tuple do not have the methods like append, insert, remove or pop that can add or remove elements. However, there is also a workaround to add or remove elements in a tuple, and you can use plus operator to concatenate two tuples and create a new one, and use the asterisk operator to repeat a tuple and create a new one. For example, let's shorten this tuple. Fruits, assign fruits plus, we'll take orange, comma, as a tuple constructor. Now I'll print fruits. So if I run it, so it will output apple, banana, cherry, and orange. So we have added an element using concatenation. But important thing is to be noted that this is a new tuple that contains added element orange. Similarly, we can say fruits, assign fruits, asterisk or star operator 2 times. And if we print fruits again, so this fruits star 2 repeat the tuple using repetition, and we have output which contains apple, banana, cherry, orange repeated twice in a new tuple. Similarly, we can remove an element from a tuple using slicing. Fruits. So if I want to remove the last element from the list, then I'll say start and does not include last element, which is -1. And then if I print fruits again, I can see the orange has been excluded from the tuple, and we have a new tuple, fruits, without orange element. So these operations will create new tuples that contains added or removed element. Note that this is not the same as adding or removing elements from the original tuple, but creating new ones. Tuple and list are both ordered collections of data that can store any type of data and allow duplicate values. However, they have some differences that make them suitable for different purposes. The main difference between tuples and lists is that tuples are immutable and lists are mutable. This means that tuples cannot be changed, modified, or deleted once they are created, while lists can be changed, modified, or deleted at any time. This also affects the performance of tuple and list. Tuples are faster and more efficient than lists because they do not need to allocate memory for adding or removing elements. Tuples also have less methods and attributes than lists, which makes them simpler and easier to use. Another difference between tuple and list is that tuples can also be used as keys in dictionaries and as element in sets, while lists cannot. This is because tuples are hashable, which means that they have a unique value that can be used to identify them. Lists are not hashable because they can change their value at any time. Therefore, you should use tuples when you want to store data that is fixed and does not need to be changed throughout the program, such as constants, coordinates, dimensions, etc. You should use list when you want to store data that is dynamic and needs to be changed throughout the program, such as user input, database record, etc. Now that you have learned about tuples in Python, it's time to practice your skills with hands-on exercise. In this exercise, you will be given a task to write a program that uses the concepts that we have learned today. You can use any of the variables, data types, operators, and type conversion functions that we have learned earlier also. You can also use input function to get the user input as a string and print function to display the output. So let's write a program that takes a tuple of numbers as input from the user, separated by commas, and prints the minimum and maximum values of the tuple using min and max functions. So let's code the solution of the program. Let's first get the tuple of numbers as a string from user input. So number is a string which we'll get from input function with enter a tuple of numbers as a prompt. Next step is to convert the comma separated string of numbers to a list of floats and then convert or cast it into a tuple using tuple constructor. So let's first create the number list from the string of numbers. So we can use list comprehension expression for item in list. So over here, we'll get the list by applying the split function on number using comma separator. So let's create the list, which will be number.split. We'll do split on comma separator, which will give us a list of string having all the numbers. So the item is n. Now we have to convert this list element n into a float element. So we'll apply float function on n, and this will convert a comma separated string of numbers to a list of float. Then let's create a number tuple variable and initialize it using tuple constructor and passing number list as a parameter, which will create our desired tuple. Next step is to calculate and print the minimum value using min function. So minimum is min of number tuple, and you'll print the minimum value using f string, including the minimum value is curly braces minimum. And finally, we'll calculate and print the maximum value using max function. Similarly, maximum min of number tuple, and finally we'll print the maximum value using f string curly braces max. That's it. Let's try to run the program. We'll give 3 tuples, 23 minus 7, 88. Oh, so there is a mistake. Instead of maximum function, I have used min function. So let's just correct it to max and then rerun it again. Tuples. So over here, the minimum is minus 89 and the maximum value is 99. Let's run with one more example. 12.6 minus 0.7, 99.98. Again, we have the correct value of minimum, which is minus 0.7, and the maximum 119.8 from the string of the tuples that we have entered. This concludes our session for today. We have learned about Python tuples and how they are different from list data type. In the next episode, we'll explore Python sets in more detail. If you have any questions or feedback, please let me know in the comments below. Thanks for tuning into Sumantra Codes. If you found this helpful, give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more coding tutorials, tips, and tech insights. Hit the notification bell too, and let's continue this coding journey together. Stay tuned.